Get that hideous piece of junk off your lawn before I cut your power tonight.
Ma'am, it's a backup generator. My daughter is diabetic.
Your daughter is not my problem. That box is a violation and you will remove it.
The county approved every connection. Don't you dare lecture me about permits.
I decide what belongs in this neighborhood, not you, not the county. You should feel lucky I even let you move in.
I didn't say a word. She had no idea I spent 6 years at the Texas Public Utility Commission investigating exactly the kind of fraud she was about to commit. And when she actually killed my power, with my 12-year-old's insulin warming in a dead fridge, she didn't just cross a line. What she did next? It cost her everything. Let me take you back to where it started. I've been an electrician since I was 26. Started pulling wire through crawl spaces in August heat so thick you could taste the insulation dust. Worked my way up to master electrician in 4 years. Residential, commercial, industrial. Then the Texas Public Utility Commission hired me as a compliance investigator. 6 years I spent walking into substations, co-ops, and municipal utilities across the state. My job was simple. Check whether the people who controlled the power grid were actually following the rules. I've seen falsified inspection reports, backdated maintenance logs, and safety violations hidden behind filing cabinets. I know what utility fraud looks like, the way a chef knows when milk is turned. I left the PUC after my wife Catherine was killed by a distracted driver on I-35 south of Waco. She was driving home from her sister's place. Lily was 10. I was 40 miles away at a job site when the hospital called. After that, nothing about our apartment in Austin felt right. The commute, the silence in the kitchen where her voice used to carry. So I sold everything, took the insurance money, and bought a 3-bedroom house in Pecan Hollow Estates, quiet HOA subdivision in Collin County, just north of Dallas. Good schools, shaded streets, a pecan tree in the backyard that Lily named Gerald the afternoon we moved in. The first 3 days felt like breathing again. Lily rode her bike in the cul-de-sac. I organized my tools in the garage. Neighbors waved. The street smelled like fresh-cut St. Augustine grass and someone's charcoal grill down the block. Then Tammy Pritchard showed up. Day 3. A white Cadillac Escalade rolled into my driveway like it owned the deed. Blonde hair shellacked into a helmet that could survive atmospheric re-entry. Linen blazer over yoga pants. Clipboard in one hand, welcome packet in the other. She didn't introduce herself, she announced herself. We like to keep things a certain way around here. You'll find the standards handbook very thorough. She walked around my house, not inside, around, taking notes on my fence height, trash can placement, and the color of my garage door trim. I stood on my own porch, watching this woman inspect my property like a health inspector grading a taco stand. I'd evaluated 200 subdivisions across Texas in my career. I knew a power trip the second I smelled one. Lily started to settle in. She made a friend, Maya Henderson, 3 doors down. They rode bikes after school while I rebuilt the workshop and pretended the quiet didn't still catch me off guard. Catherine's absence had a sound. A kitchen timer going off with nobody calling out to check it. 2 weeks after we moved in, the grid backed me up. A summer surge knocked out half of Collin County for 14 hours straight. ERCOT buckled under the load. Every house on our street went dark at 2 in the afternoon, when the heat index hit 106. Lily's insulin pump beeped a low battery warning by hour 3. By hour 6, the refrigerator had gone warm, and her backup insulin pen was sitting in a fridge that read 78 degrees. I drove 40 minutes to the nearest CVS at 2 in the morning, bought a replacement vial, and drove back with the AC on full blast, and a cooler bag wedged between the seats. That night I ordered a Generac 22 kilowatt standby generator and filed for a 200 amp panel upgrade with Collin County. The inspector came out, signed off on every connection. Clean, legal, documented. The kind of install I used to approve when I carried a PUC badge. 72 hours after the Generac hummed to life, I found a letter in my mailbox. HOA violation notice. Outdoor mechanical equipment in violation of Section 4.7, Community Aesthetic Standards. Removal required within 30 days. Fine, $250 per day. I looked at the signature. Tammy Pritchard, President, Pecan Hollow Estates, HOA. 9 years in the chair. I folded the letter, slid it into a file folder, and wrote the date on the tab. Old habits from the PUC. You never know when a paper trail is going to save your life. I responded the way I would have responded at the PUC. with paperwork. Certified letter to the HOA board. Return receipt requested. Attached, my Collin County electrical permit, the signed inspection report, and a highlighted copy of Texas Property Code Section 209.009, which prohibits HOAs from banning safety devices that have been approved by a governmental entity. I kept the language polite, professional, the kind of letter that says, "I've done this before," without having to spell it out. Tammy didn't respond to the letter. She responded to the idea that someone had the nerve to send one. The fines started running. $250 a day. By the end of the first week, the ledger showed $1,750. By the end of the second, it doubled. I didn't pay a dime. I knew those fines were built on a violation that didn't exist, and I knew that under Texas law, an HOA can't enforce a fine that contradicts a county-issued permit. But knowing the law and proving it are two different games. And Tammy was betting I wouldn't bother playing the second one. I attended the next board meeting. First Tuesday of the month, 7 o'clock, in the Pecan Hollow Clubhouse, a converted pool house that smelled like Maxwell House coffee and carpet cleaner. The air conditioning was cranked to 64 degrees, which felt like a meat locker after the 102 outside. Tammy sat at the head of a folding table, flanked by 3 board members, who looked like hostages at a press conference. Brenda Kay, the secretary, sat beside her with a laptop, ready to transcribe whatever version of reality Tammy preferred. I stood up during open comment period and presented my case. County permit, inspector sign-off, state statute, 3 minutes, clear and factual, no anger. Tammy let me finish the way a cat lets a mouse run. Then she smiled. "This isn't a courtroom, Mr. Coulter. The board has already reviewed your situation. The violation stands." The 3 other board members stared at the table. Nobody voted. Nobody discussed. The decision had been made before I walked in the door. I'd seen cleaner democratic processes in countries that hold elections at gunpoint. 2 days later, a letter arrived from Preston and Kay Legal Associates. Thick envelope, embossed letterhead. The language was aggressive. Cease and desist. Threat of property lien within 14 days. Legal fees to be assessed against my account. It read like someone had watched 3 courtroom dramas and tried to write the 4th. Something about it nagged me. Not the threats. Those were boilerplate HOA intimidation. It was the name. Kay. Same last name as Brenda Kay, the board secretary who sat next to Tammy at every meeting. I pulled up the State Bar of Texas Attorney search. Typed Preston and Kay Legal Associates. 0 results. Tried Todd Kay, the name on the signature line. No active license. No inactive license. No record of any kind. Dug deeper. Todd Kay had a paralegal certificate from an online program dated 2014. He'd never passed the bar exam, never sat for it. He was Brenda's cousin from Plano who did freelance notary work on the side. This man was about as much a lawyer as I am a ballerina. In Texas, impersonating a licensed attorney is a Class A misdemeanor under Penal Code Section 38.122. Up to $4,000 in fines and a year in county jail. Most people never need to know that. I had seen 3 cases exactly like it during my PUC years. Shell companies sending legal threats on behalf of utilities that didn't want their own fingerprints on the envelope. I printed the State Bar results, saved the letter, photographed the envelope, postmark, return address, everything. Filed it all. Made a margin note. Unauthorized practice of law. Criminal referral potential. I didn't call anyone. Didn't confront Tammy. Didn't mention it to Garrett next door, who'd taken to bringing me coffee on Tuesday mornings and warnings on Thursday evenings. I just filed and waited. I'd learned a long time ago at the PUC that the best investigations aren't built on confrontation. They're built on patience. You let the other side keep moving, keep talking, keep leaving fingerprints on things they shouldn't be touching. Every action they take after the first lie is another layer of evidence. Tammy was building her case against me. She just didn't realize I was building mine against her. And mine had footnotes. 3 weeks into the fines, my neighbor Garrett Huxley walked across the yard with 2 cans of Lone Star and a look on his face that told me this wasn't a social visit. Garrett was 61, retired, and had spent 30 years as a justice of the peace before hanging it up to restore vintage Mustangs in his garage. He had the quiet authority of a man who'd heard 10,000 lies under oath and could smell one through a closed door. "She's done this before," he said, settling into the lawn chair I kept near my workbench. "The Winston's on Sycamore. fined into foreclosure over a basketball hoop. County records show the house was bought at auction by her husband's cousin for 60 cents on the dollar. The Mendozas on Elm. She reported their garden shed to code enforcement 17 times in 2 years. They sold and left. The Harrisons on Oak. She declared their fire pit a burn hazard. They lasted 8 months. He pulled a folded paper from his shirt pocket. 6 names, 6 families, all gone within Tammy's 9-year reign. None of them fought back publicly. All of them left the way people do when the cost of staying becomes heavier than the cost of losing your home. She doesn't enforce rules, Garrett said, taking a long pull from his beer. She weaponizes them, and she picks people who don't have the resources or the stomach to fight. I thanked him, added the names to my file. Then I waited for what I knew was coming next. It came on a Monday. Tammy filed a formal complaint with the Collin County Code Enforcement Division, alleging that my generator was a fire and explosion hazard to adjacent residential properties. She attached photographs, taken from the sidewalk at angles designed to make the Generac look as industrial and threatening as possible. She demanded an emergency inspection. The county sent Larry Bowen, 28 years as an electrical inspector, the kind of man who wears steel-toed boots to a desk job because he might get called to a site before lunch. He spent 45 minutes going through every connection, every ground wire, every junction box, and every foot of conduit running from the Generac to my panel. When he finished, he stood up, wiped the sweat from the back of his neck with a shop towel, and shook his head. This is one of the cleanest residential generator installs I've seen in Collin County. Whoever did this knows exactly what they're doing. I did it myself, I said. He nodded like that explained everything. Then he dropped his voice. Between you and me, she's called us 4 times in 3 weeks. We turned her down 3 times because there was no basis. This time, she threatened to call the county commissioner's office and go to the press if we didn't send someone. 4 calls, 3 rejections, 1 political threat, all for a generator that exceeded every code in the book. Larry filed his report. No violations found. Full compliance with the National Electrical Code and Collin County residential standards. He noted in the comments that the installation exceeded standard residential quality. I asked for a copy. He gave me 2. I mailed one to Tammy, certified. Return receipt requested. No cover letter, just the report. Sometimes the quietest response is the loudest. It didn't slow her down. It sped her up. That Thursday, she called an emergency board meeting. Brenda sent homeowner notice with 12 hours lead time, barely legal under the CC and Rs. 3 board members showed up wearing the expressions of men who've been voluntold to attend. Tammy pushed through a motion to double my fine, $500 a day, citing my continued non-compliance with community safety standards. The vote was 4-0. Same democracy you'd find at a polling station, with 1 name on the ballot. The motion passed so fast that Brenda had the updated fine schedule printed before the vote was called. I know because the ink on the handout still smelled warm from the printer. The official minutes recorded my position as, the homeowner declined to cooperate with the community's safety review process. I had cooperated with every single inspection. The county's own report said exactly that, but Tammy controlled the minutes the way she controlled the narrative, by writing the ending before the meeting started. Total fines on the ledger, $7,000 and climbing. I hadn't paid a cent. It happened on a Thursday, July 14th, 4:47 in the afternoon. I was 30 minutes away, finishing a panel swap at a commercial kitchen in McKinney, when my phone buzzed. Lily's name on the screen. Dad, the lights went out. Her voice was steady, but tight. The voice of a 12-year-old who's learned to manage fear the way most kids manage spelling tests. The fridge stopped humming. My pump is beeping. Are you safe? I'm okay, but it's getting hot. I told her to grab the cooler bag from the pantry, fill it with whatever ice was left in the freezer, and wrap her insulin pen in a dish towel inside. Then go sit on the front porch, where the shade from Gerald would keep the air moving. I drove 90 on the I-75 service road, both hands white on the wheel. The highway shimmered with heat mirages that looked like silver lakes dissolving into asphalt. The whole drive, I did math. Insulin degrades above 77 degrees. Lily's pump reservoir had about 4 hours of backup. The fridge had been 36 degrees that morning. Without power in a Texas July, it would hit room temperature in under 3 hours. When I pulled into the driveway, the first thing I saw was Lily on the porch steps with the blue cooler bag in her lap. She'd figured it out, pulled the ice, wrapped the insulin, sealed the bag. Smart kid. Brave kid. The second thing I saw was every other house on the street lit up like nothing had happened. Porch lights, kitchen windows. The Hendersons' TV flickering blue through their curtains 3 doors down. Everyone had power. Everyone but us. I checked the breaker panel. No tripped breakers. No scorched wires. No blown fuses. The problem wasn't inside the house. It was at the source. The service line from the main to my meter hung slack where it connected to the utility pole at the corner of my lot. Someone had disconnected us at the transformer. I called Lone Star Electric Co-op. Sat on hold for 38 minutes listening to a banjo loop that could break a hostage negotiator. When a representative finally answered, she pulled my account and went quiet for a long moment. "Sir, your service was disconnected per an emergency safety order. Our records indicate a hazardous wiring condition was identified at your address. Who filed the order? I'm not authorized to release that information. Was there an inspection? The records indicate a field inspection was conducted on July 14th. Today. Yes, sir. At what time? Pause. The report is time-stamped 9:15 a.m. 9:15 in the morning. I was home until 10:30. Nobody knocked on my door. Nobody walked my property. No co-op truck parked on my street. I'd been drinking coffee on the front porch until I left for McKinney. The entire street was visible from my chair. The inspection never happened. The report was a work of fiction, and somebody inside that co-op had signed off on it like it was a grocery list. I hung up, walked to the garage, hit the start switch on the Generac. The machine Tammy Pritchard had spent 2 months trying to make me tear out. It roared to life with a diesel growl that rattled the garage windows. 90 seconds later, every light in the house came back on. The fridge hummed. Lily's pump stopped beeping. The machine she tried to take from me just saved my daughter's life. And the power she illegally cut was the reason my daughter needed saving. Sit with that one for a second. Under federal law and Texas PUC regulations, disconnecting residential power requires a written 10-day notice, a documented legal basis, and the homeowner's right to appeal before shutoff. Skip any one of those steps, and the utility faces fines of up to $25,000 per day. Skip all of them, which is exactly what happened here. And you're not looking at a fine. You're looking at a federal case. I put Lily to bed with the AC running and a fresh insulin pen in the fridge. Then I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of coffee that went cold while I stared at the screen. The house was quiet, just the hum of the Generac outside and the distant pulse of cicadas in Gerald's branches. This wasn't a neighborhood dispute. This wasn't a fine over a generator. Someone inside an electric utility had fabricated a safety report, used a technician's name without his knowledge, and disconnected power to a home with a medically dependent child. No notice, no inspection, no legal basis. I knew what that was. I'd investigated cases exactly like it for 6 years. I opened a new folder on my desktop, named it Pritchard, and I started building the kind of file that doesn't just get someone fired. The next morning I woke up at 5, before Lily, before the heat, before the cicadas started their chorus in Gerald's branches. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen. Then I did what I used to do for a living. Step 1. I filed a public information request with Lone Star Electric Co-op under the Texas Public Information Act. I requested the complete disconnection order for my address, the attached field inspection report, the name and title of the authorizing manager, and all internal communications referencing my property in the previous 60 days. I also requested personnel records for any technician named in the inspection, specifically work schedules and leave approvals. Step 2. I called Tom Gentry at the PUC. Tom was a senior investigator. We'd worked the same corridor of East Texas co-ops together in 2018. A rate manipulation case that ended with a cooperative manager losing both his job and his pension. Tom didn't trade favors. He traded evidence, which was better. Tom, I've got a residential disconnection with 0 prior notice, no legitimate safety finding, and a field report filed on a day when nobody set foot on my property. This is exactly the kind of case we used to open files on. He didn't hesitate. Send me everything you have. I'll flag it for formal inquiry and request a litigation hold on all related records. 5 business days later, the co-op's response arrived in a brown envelope that smelled like toner and poor judgment. I cleared the kitchen table, set down a fresh cup of coffee, and read every page twice. The house was quiet, just the tick of the wall clock and the low hum of the Generac outside. The disconnection order was signed by Dale Pritchard, Senior Operations Manager, Lone Star Electric Co-op. The last name hit me before the title did. Pritchard, Tammy Pritchard's brother-in-law. The attached field inspection report was signed by Clint Avery, Field Technician Level 3. It described a hazardous wiring condition presenting immediate safety risk to adjacent residential structures. Dated July 14th. I checked one thing. It took 45 seconds and blew the entire operation apart. Lone Star's internal leave calendar, obtained through my PUC request, showed Clint Avery on approved vacation from July 12th through the 18th, 7 consecutive days. I pulled up his Instagram, public profile. On July 14th, the exact day he supposedly inspected my property and filed a report recommending emergency disconnection, Clint Avery was standing on a fishing pier at South Padre Island, holding a red drum the size of a toddler, geotagged, time-stamped 2:17 p.m. His wife commented underneath, "Best catch of the trip." The man who condemned my house was 400 miles away, catching fish in the Gulf of Mexico. I set the papers down and let the weight of it settle into my chest. This wasn't a clerical error. This wasn't negligence. This was a coordinated fabrication between two people who thought nobody would check. Dale Pritchard created a fake safety report, attached a technician's name without that technician's knowledge or consent, used it to authorize an unlawful disconnection of residential power. And he did it because his sister-in-law, the HOA president who'd been trying to force me out for 2 months, asked him to pick up the phone and make it happen. Under the Texas Utilities Code, Section 39.002, that's utility fraud. Under federal law, because Lone Star receives funding through the USDA Rural Utilities Service, it's wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343, punishable by up to 20 years in federal prison. I opened the Pritchard folder on my laptop, poured a fresh cup of coffee, and started building a timeline that would end careers. For the first time since Catherine died, I felt the old engine turning over inside my chest. Not anger, precision. Over the next 2 weeks, I turned my garage into a command center and my house into a fortress. First priority, make sure Tammy could never threaten Lily's safety again. I ordered 2 Tesla Powerwall units, 13.5 kilowatt hours each, 27 total. Combined with the Generac, my house could now run fully independent of the grid for 72 hours. Longer if I managed the load carefully. I did the installation myself, bolted the units to the garage wall, wired them into the panel through a gateway controller, and programmed the system to switch over in 6 seconds flat if grid power dropped. The whole setup cost $11,000 in parts. I saved another $8,000 in labor. When you've spent your career inspecting other people's electrical work, you tend to trust your own hands. I mounted 4 ring floodlight cameras, 1 on each face of the house: front porch, back patio, south driveway, north fence line. 24/7 recording with 60-day cloud backup. Motion-activated floodlights that would turn my yard into a stadium at the first sign of movement after dark. If Tammy stepped on my property to measure a blade of grass, I'd have it in high definition from 2 angles with a timestamp and a spotlight. Then I started the paperwork that would actually end this. I filed a formal docket complaint with the Texas Public Utility Commission. Case number assigned. Investigator named. The bureaucratic machine that grinds slow, but grinds to dust. I attached the fabricated inspection report, Clint Avery's leave records, the Instagram photo with geotag, and the disconnection order bearing Dale Pritchard's signature. I filed a separate consumer protection complaint with the Texas Attorney General, specifically the division that handles utility abuse. Different agency, same evidence, same conclusion. Then I submitted a detailed report to the FBI's Dallas field office, Public Corruption Unit. This was the one that carried the most weight. Lone Star Electric Co-op receives low-interest federal loans through the USDA Rural Utilities Service. When an employee of a federally funded organization fabricates official records, it triggers wire fraud jurisdiction under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. The FBI doesn't investigate petty disputes, but they investigate people who lie inside organizations funded by taxpayer money. Dale Pritchard's salary was paid in part by federal loans. While the federal machinery turned, I used a right most homeowners don't know they have. Under Texas Property Code Section 209.005, Any dues-paying member can demand a financial audit of the HOA. I filed the request. Tammy stalled, said the records were being updated and would be available at the next quarterly review. I cited the statute again, in writing, and gave her 10 business days. She complied, grudgingly. The records arrived in a banker's box that Brenda Kay dropped at my door without making eye contact. I spent 3 nights going through every receipt, invoice, and bank statement. On the second night, I found it. $47,000 paid over 3 years to Pritchard Landscaping, LLC, for grounds maintenance, tree trimming, and community beautification projects. The company was registered to Glenn Pritchard, Tammy's husband. I pulled up Google Earth and compared satellite imagery of the common areas across the same 3 years. Same grass, same trees, same cracked sidewalk edging. Not one new shrub, not one fresh mulch bed. $47,000 for landscaping that existed only on paper. Pritchard Landscaping's biggest contribution to the neighborhood was the invoice. I brought in allies. Garrett helped me draft a petition for a special community meeting. Under Texas law, the board must hold one if 25% of homeowners requested. We needed 32 signatures out of 127. We got 43. Nina Solis signed first. She'd been fined $6,200 for painting her garage door a shade of gray that was 2 tones off the approved palette. Pete Langford signed second. Tammy had forced him to dismantle a woodworking shop in his garage, costing him $12,000 in tools and materials. My last call was to Sandra Weeks, an investigative reporter at KXAS-TV, NBC's Dallas-Fort Worth affiliate. Sandra had done a 3-part series on HOA abuse in North Texas the previous year that led to 2 board recalls and a state legislative hearing. When I told her what I had, a fake utility disconnection targeting a home with a diabetic child, a forged inspection report, $47,000 in phantom landscaping, and a 9-year pattern of driving families out of their homes, she went quiet for 3 seconds. Then she said 4 words. "When's the meeting?" I gave her the date, the time, and the address. She didn't ask if she could bring a camera. She asked how many she should bring. Tammy didn't know what I'd been building, but she could feel the ground shifting beneath her sensible flats. 3 weeks after I filed the audit request, she launched her counterattack. A letter arrived at every mailbox in Pecan Hollow, all 127 units. Glossy paper, HOA letterhead, bold font across the top. Special assessment notice, $1,200 per household. The stated purpose, Community Legal Defense Fund, to protect Pecan Hollow estates from homeowners whose non-compliance threatens property values and community standards. I did the math before finishing the first paragraph. 1,200 times 127, $152,400. She was raising over $150,000 of other people's money to sue one man over a generator the county had already approved. Somewhere in a law school textbook, there's a chapter on exactly this kind of behavior. It's filed under racketeering. The same day, a second letter arrived addressed only to me. Tammy's signature, formal tone, accumulated fines, $8,400. The board intended to file a lien on my property within 30 days. The letter helpfully reminded me that unpaid liens could result in foreclosure proceedings. I'd heard this story before, from Garrett, about the Winstons. Fine them, lien them, foreclose, buy the house through a relative at a discount. Tammy had built a machine for extracting families from their homes, and she'd been running it for 9 years on people who didn't have the resources or the knowledge to push back. I showed the letter to Garrett that evening. He read it the way judges read things, slowly, absorbing the weight of each word. She did the same thing to the Winstons. Lien, then foreclosure auction. Her husband's cousin bought the house for 60% of market. They were a young couple with a new baby. They didn't know they could fight it. "She won't do it to me," I said. "No," Garrett agreed, folding the letter and handing it back. "She won't." Over the next 2 weeks, Tammy went door to door. 3 neighbors told me about it independently. Her pitch never varied. Part concern, part fear, part quiet coercion. If we don't act now, property values will tank. Do you really want to live next to a man who thinks he's above the rules? She framed herself as a protector. She made me the threat. Some people bought it. A few started avoiding me at the mailbox cluster. The Hendersons, 3 doors down, stopped waving. Lily noticed. Kids always do. She came home one afternoon and told me her friend Maya, the Hendersons' daughter, said her parents told her to stay away from our house for a while. Dad, did we do something wrong? I sat her down at the kitchen table. Some people use rules to help their neighbors. Other people use rules to hurt them. We didn't do anything wrong, and I'm going to prove it. While Tammy was working the phones, Nina Solis was working hers. She called Tammy on a Tuesday evening, a planned conversation about the special assessment, with her phone recording the entire thing. Texas is a one-party consent state under Penal Code Section 16.02. That means only one person in a conversation needs to know it's being recorded for the recording to be legally admissible. If you live in a one-party state, your phone's voice memo app is the most powerful legal tool you own. They talked for 11 minutes. Most of it was standard HOA posturing. But at the 8-minute mark, Tammy said something that would later play in front of 94 homeowners and a television camera. Once we get the lien filed, he'll have to sell. And trust me, I know exactly who'll buy that house. Nina played the recording for me that night in Garrett's garage. The four of us, me, Garrett, Nina, and Pete, sat under the fluorescent shop light with the smell of motor oil and sawdust hanging in the air, listening to Tammy Pritchard describe her plan to seize my home. Nobody spoke for a few seconds after it ended. Then Pete leaned forward and said, "She's been doing this for 9 years and nobody ever hit record?" "Nobody ever believed anyone would listen," Garrett said quietly. I saved the file to 3 separate locations, added it to the folder. The Pritchard file was 4 inches thick now, organized by category: utility fraud, financial fraud, unauthorized legal practice, and procedural violations. The meeting was 3 weeks away. 2 weeks before the special meeting, Tammy's world started cracking, and she could feel it, even if she couldn't see exactly where the fractures ran. It started with a phone call that Dale didn't expect. The PUC's Austin office contacted Lone Star Electric Co-op and requested, not asked, requested, the original disconnection file for my address. Full documentation, chain of custody, name of every employee who touched the order. Dale's supervisor pulled him into a conference room and asked him to explain why a state regulatory agency had questions about one of his disconnection orders. Dale panicked, called Tammy that night. I know this because of what happened next. Within 48 hours, the disconnection record in Lone Star's internal system changed. The original entry, emergency safety shutoff, hazardous wiring condition, became scheduled maintenance, transformer upgrade, sector 14. Clint Avery's name vanished from the inspection report. The new version showed no technician assigned, just a routine maintenance note with no individual signature. Dale thought he was cleaning up his mess. What he was actually doing was adding obstruction of a state investigation and evidence tampering to his growing list of federal charges. Because I had anticipated exactly this. When I filed my original PUC complaint, I included a formal request for litigation hold, a legal mechanism requiring the agency to preserve all original records in their unaltered state. Tom Gentry processed it the same day I submitted it. The PUC's copy of the original disconnection order, Dale's signature, Clint's name, the fabricated safety details, the emergency classification, was locked in a state database that Dale couldn't reach with a search warrant and a ladder. He had just created a before and after comparison that would make any federal prosecutor weep with gratitude. The original said one thing, the altered version said another, and the PUC had both. Meanwhile, Tammy took her campaign somewhere darker than special assessments. She went personal, door to door. Not with fine schedules this time, with character assassination. She told the Hendersons I had mental health issues and might be dangerous to the children in the neighborhood. She told the family on Birch Lane that I was under investigation by authorities. Technically true. I'd filed the complaints that triggered the investigations. But she inverted the story to make me the target instead of the accuser. The whisper campaign worked on enough people to matter. The pool went quiet when Lily and I walked through the gate on Saturday. Conversations stopped at the mailbox cluster. A few people altered their walking routes to avoid passing my house. Lily noticed every one of those small cruelties, even when she pretended not to. One afternoon, she came home from school and sat at the kitchen table without opening her backpack. Maya's mom told her you're in trouble with the police. She said we might have to move. I put down the invoice I was reading. We're not moving. Nobody is in trouble with the police. The woman saying that is the same one who cut our power while you were home alone. I looked her in the eyes. She picked the wrong house. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing for the meeting the way I used to prepare for PUC hearings. A USB drive loaded with everything. The original inspection report from the PUC's preserved archive, the altered version from Lone Star's system, side-by-side comparison, Clint Avery's vacation records, and the Instagram photo, geotagged, time-stamped, undeniable. Nina's recording of Tammy admitting the lien and sell scheme, the complete financial audit showing $47,000 flowing to a landscaping company that never landscaped anything. Google Earth images proving not a single plant changed over 3 years. A full chronological timeline of every violation, every fine, every fake legal letter, and every family Tammy had driven out over 9 years. Sandra Weeks confirmed her crew. Tom Gentry confirmed he'd attend, officially as part of the ongoing PUC investigation. And I'd spoken with the Collin County Sheriff's Office, not to file a report, to let them know that evidence of multiple felonies would be presented in a public forum, and the subjects would be in the room. Sheriff Tipton assigned a deputy, just in case. The file was 5 inches thick. The USB weighed less than an ounce, and in 3 days, Tammy Pritchard was going to walk into the clubhouse she'd ruled for 9 years, expecting to run the meeting the way she always had. She had no idea it would be the last one she'd ever chair. Tuesday evening, 7 o'clock, Pecan Hollow Clubhouse. I got there at 6:45. The parking lot was already full. Cars lined the curb for 2 blocks. Out of 127 homes, 94 owners showed up, standing room only. Folding chairs ran out before the first row filled. People leaned against the walls. The air conditioning fought a losing battle against 94 bodies and a Texas evening that refused to drop below 92. Tammy sat at the front table in a white blazer, hair freshly blown out, lipstick precise. Brenda Kay sat beside her with her laptop open, fingers poised, ready to record whatever version of events Tammy dictated. 3 board members flanked them, looking like men who'd drawn the short straw at a funeral. What Tammy didn't notice was the KXASTV van parked on the side street. Sandra Weeks and her cameraman slipped in through the back door at 6:55, with a handheld camera already rolling. They sat in the last row. She didn't notice Tom Gentry in the 3rd row either. Tucked in polo with the Texas PUC seal on the chest, notepad in his lap. Or Deputy Holt near the exit, arms folded, shoulder radio turned low. Tammy opened with 6 minutes about community standards, property values, and the sacred trust of HOA governance. She used the word standards 11 times. She didn't say a single specific thing. It was the verbal equivalent of decorating an empty room. Then she called for discussion of the special assessment. Garrett stood up. Before we vote, the homeowners who petitioned this meeting have a presentation. He looked at me. Wade. I walked to the front, plugged my USB into the projector laptop. The screen behind Tammy's head flickered to life. The room went quiet. Not polite quiet. Courtroom quiet. Slide 1, the disconnection order. Dale Pritchard's signature. Emergency safety shutoff. Hazardous wiring condition. Dated July 14th. Slide 2, Clint Avery's approved vacation request. July 12th through the 18th. Beside it, Clint's Instagram post, grinning on a fishing pier at South Padre Island, holding a red drum that weighed more than my briefcase. Geotagged. Time-stamped July 14th, 2:17 p.m. The man who supposedly inspected my house that morning was 400 miles south, sunburned and happy. A murmur ran through the room like a wave. Slide 3, side by side. Left column, the original co-op record, emergency safety shutoff. Right column, the altered record submitted after the PUC began its inquiry. Scheduled maintenance, transformer upgrade. Same address, same date, 2 completely different stories. Someone changed the record after investigators started asking questions. Tammy opened her mouth. That's not what... I didn't stop. Slide 4, the financial audit. 3 years of invoices from Pritchard Landscaping, LLC, registered to Glenn Pritchard, Tammy's husband. $47,000 for grounds maintenance and beautification. Next to the invoices, Google Earth satellite images of the same common areas, captured annually. Same grass, same trees, same cracked concrete edging. Not one new plant, not one bag of mulch. $47,000 for landscaping that never left the invoice. The murmur became voices. Someone in the middle rows said, "You have got to be kidding me." Slide 5. I pressed play. Tammy's own voice filled the room through the projector speakers, clear as church bells on a Sunday morning. Once we get the lien filed, he'll have to sell. And trust me, I know exactly who'll buy that house. The room erupted. Tammy stood up so fast her chair rolled into the wall behind her. Her face went from composed to crimson in the time it takes to gasp. This is a violation of my privacy. I spoke for the first time since the slides began. Calm, level. The way I used to speak in PUC hearings, when the evidence was so clear it didn't need volume. Ma'am, Texas is a one-party consent state. Everything presented tonight comes from public records, your own HOA financial documents, and a formal PUC investigation that you set in motion when you ordered power cut to a house with a diabetic child inside. Tom Gentry stood, introduced himself. Texas Public Utility Commission, senior investigator. He announced that the PUC had opened a formal investigation into Lone Star Electric Co-op's disconnection practices. Dale Pritchard had been suspended from his position as of that morning. Deputy Holt stepped forward from the exit door, served Tammy Pritchard with a citation. Financial fraud related to misuse of HOA funds, conspiracy to commit unlawful utility disconnection. Tammy's eyes swept the room, searching for a single sympathetic face. Brenda Kay had already closed her laptop and was walking toward the side door. 9 years of loyal minute-taking evaporated in the time it takes to screenshot a fraud charge. Garrett called the vote. Removal of Tammy Pritchard as president of the Pecan Hollow Estates Homeowners Association. 91 in favor. 3 abstentions, 0 opposed. Sandra Weeks got every frame. The aftermath came in waves, and every one of them hit Tammy Pritchard's shoreline. Dale Pritchard was terminated from Lone Star Electric Co-op within 72 hours. The co-op's board issued a public statement acknowledging the unauthorized and unethical disconnection and announced a complete overhaul of shut-off procedures. Future disconnections would require dual manager sign-off, a 10-day written notice by certified mail, and a verified field inspection with photographic documentation. The kind of safeguards that should have existed before a 12-year-old girl had to wrap her own insulin in a towel and sit on a porch in 100-degree heat. Clint Avery cooperated fully with investigators. He provided a sworn statement confirming he was on vacation in South Padre Island on July 14th and had never inspected my property. 10 years of solid work at the co-op, and Dale had used his name like a stamp on a fake passport. The FBI's Dallas field office opened a wire fraud investigation under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. Because Lone Star receives federal funding through the USDA Rural Utilities Service, falsifying internal records triggered federal jurisdiction. Dale was looking at up to 20 years. His attorney tried to negotiate. But when the PUC has your original record and the co-op has your altered one, the math doesn't leave much room for creative lawyering. Tammy's reckoning was slower but heavier. The Collin County DA charged her with misapplication of fiduciary property, a state jail felony in Texas, for amounts exceeding $10,000. The $47,000 paid to Pritchard Landscaping, LLC, was ordered returned to the HOA in full. Glenn Pritchard faced his own charges for submitting fraudulent invoices. Todd K., the fake attorney, caught a Class A misdemeanor for unauthorized practice of law. Lone Star settled with me privately, $78,000, covering the unlawful disconnection, medical endangerment to Lily, legal costs, and the infrastructure upgrades I'd been forced to make. The check arrived 6 weeks after the meeting. I used part of it to pay off the power walls. Sandra Weeks aired her 3-part investigation on consecutive evenings. It opened with footage from the meeting, Tammy's face dissolving as the slides appeared, her own voice playing through the speakers, Brenda speedwalking toward the exit. The series was picked up by national affiliates and went viral, 2.1 million views in the first week. Hundreds of homeowners across Texas wrote in with their own stories. Pecan Hollow held a new election. Garrett was chosen as interim president. The new board's first act was creating a homeowner rights review committee, an independent panel required to approve any fine over $100 before it's issued. Second, they established the Pecan Hollow Transparency Fund, mandating annual financial audits by an outside CPA. Third, they canceled every fine Tammy had issued during her 9-year reign. all of them. They also seeded a legal assistance fund, using the returned $47,000 to help any future resident facing HOA overreach. Nina got her $6,200 back. Pete rebuilt his workshop. The Hendersons started waving again. On a Saturday morning about a month after the meeting, Lily and I sat on the back porch. The Generac hummed softly by the garage. The power walls glowed green. Gerald dropped a handful of leaves onto the grass like he was applauding. Lily was sketching in her notebook. She'd been drawing more since everything settled, which her counselor said was healthy. She looked up. "Dad, are we staying?" "Yeah, kid, we're staying." That evening, I opened the mailbox and found an envelope with the PUC seal, a formal acknowledgement letter. At the bottom, in Tom Gentry's handwriting, "Once an inspector, always an inspector." I read it twice, folded it, put it in the file. Then I closed the folder and set it on the shelf. Some files you keep because the fight isn't over. This one I kept because it was. If you've ever had an HOA fine you for something that wasn't a violation, threaten your home over a rule they invented, or use their little corner of authority to make your life miserable, tell me your story in the comments. You might just see it in our next video. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Because the next story, it's about a woman who tried to condemn her neighbor's barn. She had no idea he'd been recording every conversation for 2 years. You don't want to miss it.
Here's the thing about Tammy Pritchard. Her downfall didn't start when Wade filed his complaint. It started the moment she assumed nobody would check. That's how petty power works. It survives on the bet that the people you're pushing around won't catch back. She ran that playbook for 9 years. It worked every time until it didn't. Wade didn't beat her with anger. He beat her the way he used to build cases at the PUC, with documents, dates, and patience. He let her keep talking, keep filing, keep leaving fingerprints on things she shouldn't have touched. Then he let the evidence do the rest. The lesson is simple: know your rights, document everything, save every letter, record every conversation your state allows. People who abuse power are never as careful as they think. The paper trail they leave behind is usually the road they hang themselves with. If you have dealt with an HOA that crossed the line, drop your story in the comments. It might be the next one we tell. Hit subscribe and stick around. The next story is about a woman who tried to condemn her neighbor's barn. They had no idea he'd been recording for 2 years. You don't want to miss it.